I'm really, really excited about the word that God has, prepared today. How many of you guys have been actually really blessed by this series? It's been, my goodness, just an opportune moment for God to just interrupt our lives. I know for me personally, and allow me to evaluate all the things that He's been bringing to the surface in my life through this series. And I know last week, Tay brought a powerful word on how the enemy wants to deceive us into giving up, how, deceiving us into believing that, it's a part of God's plan to get comfortable and to settle right where we're at. But by the end of her sermon, she reminded us that God has called us to be fruitful. God has called us to reap a harvest. We are all called to a harvest. But the harvest that we reap is dependent on us. Your harvest is dependent on you. And there's only 3 options of crops. It's not like this whole array of options. There's only 3 options of crops. We're going to go to Galatians chapter 6. We're going to go back to Galatians chapter 6. And we're going to start in verse 7. And we're going to go through verse 9. There's only 3 options of crops. Starting in verse 7, Galatians 6:7 says, God will never be mocked. For what you plant will always be the very thing you harvest. The harvest you reap reveals the seed that you planted. If you plant the corrupt seeds of self-life into this natural realm, you can expect a harvest of corruption. If you plant the good seeds of spirit life, you will reap beautiful fruits that grow from the everlasting life of the Spirit. And don't allow yourselves to get weary or to be weary in planting good seeds, for the season of reaping the wonderful harvest you've planted is coming. I want to focus a little bit, though, on verse 8, where it talks about the types of harvest, right? There's only 3 types of crops. Verse 8 talks about I don't know if you guys can see it. I'm hoping you guys can see it. But verse 8 talks about beautiful fruits that grow from good seeds of spirit life. This is a harvest that's good, a harvest that's healthy and that's abundant. For those of you that can't see it, we have a beautiful plant here that has fruits and apples and grapes. So just use your imagination. So 1 is a harvest. Thank you. Oh, let there be light. 1, there's a harvest that's good, healthy, and abundant. That's 1. That's 1 option, right? Verse 8 also talks about a harvest that corrupt seeds produce corruption. This is a harvest that is rotting, that's bitter, and that's infected. This is a harvest that has produced corruption. This is a harvest that's infected. But verse 8 also tells us that the harvest you reap reveals the seed that you've planted. And some of us could be living in a barren and empty land because we're just no longer planting. we're no longer planning anything. Some of us are living in a barren and empty harvest because we've stopped planting. So we've got three options of crops. We've got a good and healthy and abundant harvest. We've got a corrupt harvest that's full of corruption and bitterness and infects everything else around us. Or we've got an empty and barren land because we just haven't planted anything. So today I want us to focus on what's coming next. Because we're all moving towards one of these. There's only three options, and we're all moving towards one of these. All of us are looking at the harvest that is coming next for us. But it's all dependent on the seeds we've been planting. It's all dependent on the seeds you're planting today. So the question is, am I ready for what's next? Am I ready for the harvest that's coming? Contingent on the seeds I have been planting. Thank you, Tay. Am I ready for what's next? All right, church, I hope you guys are buckled in your seats because we're just going to go right into it, okay? Starting my first point today is the deception is there's no consequence for not doing anything. So we're going to focus on the barren land for a minute, right? Because the deception is that there is no consequences for not doing anything. All three of these are products of the seeds that have been planted. All three of these are products of the seeds that have been planted. We have good seed, we have corrupt seed, and we have no seed. Negligence is a seed. Negligence is a seed. Negligence is I know and I refuse to do. I know and I refuse to do. This empty, barren land is a harvest of negligent seeds that have been planted. Because I know God has given me seeds and I know I have a choice to plant. I know I'm supposed to sow, but I refuse to sow. There is no reward for negligence. There will never be a reward for negligence. Doing nothing will always reproduce nothing. 0 times 0 will always be 0. 0 times 100 will always be 0. There is never a reward for negligence. And see, the trick of the enemy is that somehow we think we can pause the harvest. The deception is that there's no consequence for not doing anything. If I'm not doing anything, then I can just kind of sit here and glide through and just, eventually it's going to come. Eventually the wind's going to come and take me somewhere. No. Negligence is a seed that is producing barren land, empty and barren land. The proper season for the following harvest will always be coming. You cannot pause the harvest. There is no pausing the harvest. It's the law of nature that God created. That the proper season for the following harvest is always going to be coming. So fall is always going to be coming for us to get apples. Okay? Thanks, Jeremiah. Okay? The apple joke. Fall is always going to be coming for us to get apples. Winter is always going to come for us to get oranges. And some of us are just finding out that oranges are harvested in the winter. You're welcome. Those of us with allergies, I'm sorry, but spring is always going to come for the flowers. Okay? Those of us who hate being hot, I'm sorry, but summer is always going to come because we live in the Valley of Sacramento and it is blazing hot. The season, the proper season for the following harvest is always going to be coming. God intentionally created everything on this earth to reap a harvest in its proper season, including us. You can never pause a harvest. Negligence is not protected under God's law. Because, see, some of us have been planting seeds of negligence, still expecting to get flowers in the spring, and when nothing comes, we tend to cast blame on God. Because we know that God is the one that creates, right? He's the one that's going to bring the harvest. And some of us have just been planting seeds of negligence, being deceived that there's no consequence for not doing anything. And then when spring comes and we don't have any flowers in our garden, we're casting blame on God. Negligence is not protected under the law of God because negligence is knowing and not doing. Doing nothing will always reproduce nothing. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, it literally starts off saying that God will not be mocked. For what you plant, you will reap. God has already done his part. God has already done his part in setting up the laws of nature in such a way that you will always reap a harvest in due season. Do you see that he literally has already set it up? He's already created a winter, a spring, a summer, a fall. He's already created a whole process in such a way that in due season you will always reap a harvest. Always. But the harvest that you reap is always going to be up to you because you are the planter. You are the one planting the seeds. Are you ready for what's next? Based on the seeds that you've been planting, are you ready for what's next? And as much as we want to pause time in the fall with the perfect 70 degree weather, we're still always going to be moving towards winter. Winter is always going to be coming after fall because there is a harvest that needs to come to fruition in the winter. The harvest is always coming. Are we ready for what's next? Based on the seeds that we're planting right now. My second point today, the harvest is coming either way. The harvest is coming either way. The deception, right? The deception of the enemy is that he wants to get us to believe that there's no consequence for not doing anything, that we can just, not focus. We know that God is asking us to do something, and it's like, no, it's just, I don't want to do it right now. I'm planting seeds of negligence, and there's not going to be a consequence for it. But obviously, we know that the harvest is always going to be coming. There's no way we can stop the harvest, right? And our current harvest, for some of us, actually for all of us, our current harvest that we're living in right now is the sum total of seeds that we've planted in seasons before. The harvest is going to come either way. And right now, our harvest is the sum total of seeds that we've planted in seasons before. What next, right? What next could we be living in now that we weren't ready for? What next are we living in right now that we were not ready for? What harvest has been produced in our crops right now that we weren't ready for? What harvest are we reaping that maybe we didn't take into account when we were planting seeds seasons ago? For some, the seeds of, anger and bitterness and self-indulgence may have finally sprouted an infected harvest. Those seeds of self-indulgence, just doing what I want to do, knowing that God is asking me to plant a certain seed and really not doing it and just doing what I want to do. What seeds of bitterness and anger has finally produced an infected harvest? For some, your faithfulness in planting good seeds in every single season has proven itself with a harvest that you can indulge and enjoy. For some, being faithful and planting the good seeds in every season, in the winter, in the fall, in the spring, and in the summer, has proven itself with a harvest that now you get to indulge and enjoy. Or for some, the seeds of negligence has begun to drain the life from you and your soil. And it could be beginning to harden. Because that soil, the longer it sits out with nothing, it's not going to stay soil. Eventually, it gets hard. Eventually, it becomes really barren land, and you can't plant anything in it. For some of us, what seeds of negligence has literally begun to drain the life from us and harden our soil. Because see, the harvest is always going to come. The harvest is coming either way. There's no avoiding a harvest. There's only being prepared or not being prepared. There's only being ready or not. What seeds are you planting now that you might not be ready for in the coming harvest? I think 2020 is probably the perfect example of the question, right? What harvest are we planting that maybe we're not ready for? I think that 2020 is the perfect example of it, because I think 2020 probably exposed more of what we weren't ready for. 2020's harvest isn't a product of a virus. The harvest is a product of the seeds we planted in the seasons before. So 2020's harvest isn't because of a pandemic or a virus. Obviously, it happened, right? But the harvest that we reaped, the harvest that was reaped from that is a product of the seeds that we planted seasons before. So either we were ready for a pandemic, either we were ready for our world to literally get turned upside down, either we were ready for the whole world to literally pause and feel like it was falling apart, or we weren't. Because the harvest was going to come either way. There was no avoiding what had happened because the harvest was going to come. God has set up the laws of nature for the harvest to always produce. And we were either ready for it or we weren't. We were either prepared for that harvest or we weren't. And whether we're willing to take responsibility or not for our harvest, the harvest will never lie. Apple seeds will always produce apple trees. The harvest will never lie. And there's no avoiding it because the harvest is coming either way. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm yelling at you guys. I promise I'm not. I promise I'm not. I think it's just preparing for this word and understanding in the current series that we're in too, and do not be deceived. How many of us, including myself, have just been deceived and blinded into thinking a certain way and expecting certain results and not being in alignment to get those certain results. And just expecting that God is always going to bring a spring that's going to produce flowers in my life, but not plant any seeds that are going to produce flowers for my life. Being deceived into thinking that, God, you're a way maker. Obviously, he is. God, you're a promise keeper. And be planting seeds of negligence, expecting him to produce a harvest that has nothing of actual weight to bear. If I'm not planting anything, I can't expect God to produce anything. It'll never work that way. Negligence is a seed that is going to continue to drain the life out of my soil. And if I am allowing the enemy to deceive me into believing that I can just neglect my soil and expect God to come through for some kind of miracle, give him nothing, and in return expect everything, I am being deceived. I am being deceived. We're going to get to our last point, and I know it seems like I'm going a little fast, but I really want us to focus in and hone in, because I really feel like this is the message that God is just preparing and wanting to speak to some of us today. My last point today is you get to decide. You get to decide. The secret to a good harvest is understanding your role. The secret to a good harvest is understanding your role. Understanding that I'm a sower. I'm not a creator. I am just a sower. I'm not the creator. I don't create the harvest. I sow the seed for the harvest. It's not up to me to produce a harvest. I'm not the creator. What's up to me are the seeds that I plant. I'm not saying this to sound egotistical. I promise I'm not. But I have never really been worried about my harvest. In other words, I've never really been worried about my future or what's going to come for my life. Honestly, I've never really been worried about it because I always understood my position. I always understood that I'm just the sower. I'm just the planter. And that's all I focused on. I just focused on planting and the seeds I was planting. Because I understood that the seeds I planted, a harvest was going to be produced from that seed. So I just focused in on my position. Whoa, I'm falling over here. Did you guys see that? How embarrassing. I just focused on planting and the seeds I was planting. And as the sower, right, as a farmer, as the sower, after I would plant a specific seed, I would just wait, okay? Now listen, after doing my part, understanding my position, and planting a specific seed, because there's only 3 crops, there's only 3 options. After planting a specific seed, I would just wait. But I would wait with expectancy. Because I knew that what I had planted was going to produce a harvest. I was waiting with expectancy because I knew that I had just planted a good seed, and soon I was going to reap a good harvest. And some of us, I think, have been frustrated with our harvest because we've tried to take on both roles of the sower and the creator. We've been blurring our lines, right? We've been trying to manipulate an apple tree after planting an apple seed the night before. Some of us are blurring the lines too much. The secret to a good harvest is understanding your role, is understanding that I get to decide the seeds I'm going to plant, but I don't get to decide in creating and producing it, right? I'm going to plant the seed and I'm going to wait, and in due season, I'm going to reap the harvest of the seed I planted. Some of us are getting frustrated because we're blurring our own lines. And because we're blurring our own lines, it's robbing the expectancy for our harvest, because we're no longer able to be excited about what's coming. We're focused on the work of making something happen that we don't have any authority to do, that we don't have any authority in that specific realm. I don't get to say and tell a tree to grow. That's God's job. My job is just to plant it and allow the seasons to come, because in due season, that apple seed's going to produce an apple tree. Your expectancy for your harvest should be according to the seeds you've planted. Confident on what's coming. Not necessarily what you're looking at now. Confident that it's coming. My expectancy is based on the seeds that I've been planting. Whatever harvest I'm reaping now, it's the seeds I planted seasons ago. And when I planted that, I did my job. I planted those seeds and I stood in my position and I allowed every season to come and to go. And I never ever wavered in understanding that in its due season, it was going to come. And regardless when it was really cold, and regardless when it rained, and regardless when it stormed, or when it was really good and the days were really great, I was always expectant, because I always knew that every season was going to serve a purpose. And I had decided the harvest that I was going to reap. I was planting good seeds, and I had stood confident in knowing that a good harvest was coming. I don't have to see it. I've sown it. I know it's coming. I don't have to see it. I've sown it. I'm understanding my position is just to plant. I'm understanding my position is just to be the sower. And God has set up the laws of nature in such a way that in due season, I'm going to produce a crop dependent on the seed that I'm planting. I don't have to see it. I've sown it. So I know it's coming. Are we ready for what's next? Because do not be deceived, a harvest is coming. And our harvest will produce what we've been planting. If I can get someone to the keys. This is what I really feel like God really wants to focus in for some of us here in the building. The question that we're asking right this morning is, are we ready for what's next? We're understanding and we're exposing the lie and the deception that the enemy has tried to get us comfortable, right? Tay talked about it. She preached about it last week, getting comfortable and settling and giving up and not planting any more seeds. And then today we're understanding and realizing that, whoa, negligence is a seed. And that's probably why I'm not bearing any fruit. Or maybe I've just been planting corrupt seeds and self-indulgence and doing what I want to do. And maybe that's why my harvest tastes a little bitter. Maybe that's why my fruit is raw a little bit. Or maybe I'm walking into a season where finally this good seeds that I've been planting in every season is starting to reap a good harvest, regardless of what it is. Here's what I feel like God is wanting to speak to us today. Being ready is a position. Being ready, am I ready for what's next? Being ready is a position. I remember as a kid, when we were going to go out to dinner or like go to like a family party or something, we would have to wait in the living room after we were finished getting ready to show our mom that we were ready to go. Okay, hey, if we're gonna go somewhere, my mom was like, hey, we're going to this place, you know the drill. And the drill was like, okay, I knew that once I was done getting ready, I had to be in the living room, ready to go, to show her that I was ready for when we were gonna leave. Because being ready is a position. And regardless, okay, my mom runs on her own time, you guys. She runs on her own time, and it's never on time. But regardless of how long my mom took when she was getting ready, I had to make sure I stayed ready in the living room, because I knew that once she came out of her room, we were leaving if I was ready or not. And if I wasn't ready, I wasn't going. And this was a time when, yes, kids would be left home alone. I was, what do you call, a latchkey kid? We were home by ourselves all the time, you guys. I was like 6 years old. It was just us. Like, it was fine. We survived. I'm here. But regardless of how long my mom took to get ready, I had to make sure I stayed ready in my position in the living room, because once she came out of her room and got in her car, she was leaving, ready or not. And if I wasn't ready, if I got a little too impatient and I went outside, if I got a little too impatient and I got my dress dirty or I messed up my hair, then I wasn't going because I wasn't ready. I was supposed to be in my position to show her I was ready. So when she left, I was either going to be with her or not, dependent if I was ready or not. Being ready is a position. Once I was in that living room, ready to go, waiting on my mom, I was telling her, I've done all the work. I've showered, I've dressed, I brushed my hair, I have my shoes on. So once I'm in the living room, I'm telling her I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to just hop in the car when you come out. Are we ready for what's next? Because what we're doing now matters. The seeds we're planting right now, they matter, because there's going to be a harvest. And you get to decide that. As much as, I would want my mom to come and, come and rescue me, right? Like after I'd gotten ready and I was waiting for her in the living room and I got impatient and I went outside and I got my dress dirty, my mom was like, hey, the agreement was that you're supposed to be in the living room waiting for me, you're ready to go, and you're not, so I'm leaving without you. As much as I wanted my mom to like baby me and be like, hey, now I have to go change her dress and I have to go do all that. As much as I wanted her to do that, she didn't do that. She would leave me. She was going. I wasn't ready. Are we ready for what's next? Are we in that position? Because a harvest is going to come either way. What we're doing right now matters. The seeds we're planting right now matter. And whether the harvest comes tomorrow or in a year or in 6 years or 10 years, all of those seeds count. All of those things matter. And you get to decide. Galatians 6 even tells us, don't get weary in planting good seeds, for the harvest is going to reap soon. You're going to reap a harvest soon, regardless. Understanding my position. Understanding that I'm just a sower, and then I get ready. I'm just a sower, and then I get in my position, and I'm ready. I'm ready for my harvest. Okay, God, I'm going to plant my seed. I know I'm tired. I know I'm in this rough spot. I know things in my family aren't going that great. I know home life sucks or whatever it is. I'm sorry I said it sucks from the pulpit. I apologize. I know that things aren't that great, but God, I'm going to just keep planting my seeds of faithfulness and showing up to your house every week. God, I know that right now, things are rough, things are hard. work is unpredictable. I don't know what money is like at the moment, but I'm just going to keep planting seeds of faithfulness and giving my tithes and offering every time because that's what you're asking me to do. I want a good harvest, so I'm going to keep planting my good seeds. God, I know I'm tired. I know things don't make sense. I know, things are falling apart, but it's okay, Lord. I'm just going to keep planting seeds of reading your word, of being in your presence, of seeking you, of surrounding myself with a community that you have placed me in. All right. I'm going to keep planting those seeds, expecting that a good harvest is coming, because I know a harvest is going to come either way. It's just dependent on the time. It's just contingent on the season, and whatever harvest is going to come is going to be coming based on the seeds that I've been planting. So it's not a matter of if the harvest is going to come, it's a matter of when the harvest is going to come. And it's not a matter of, am I going to produce good seed or bad seed? It's a matter of which one are you choosing? Because you get to decide. You get to decide what your harvest is going to look like. Maybe some of us aren't ready. I'm not expecting all of us to be ready. Obviously, God has brought this word for a reason. And maybe some of us aren't ready. And I feel like that's who God is trying to reach right now. Because there's a harvest coming. There's a harvest coming, not just in your personal life, but with us as a church. There's a harvest coming. We've been planting seeds. Pastor mentioned it earlier today in our It's Time campaign. We've been planting seeds. We've been planting good seeds in our community and doing God's work, and there's a harvest coming. Or in your personal life, you've been planting seeds, and there's a harvest coming. And right here, I feel like the Holy Spirit is just wanting to pause and reflect and go inward on ourselves and ask ourselves if we're ready for that harvest to come. Have we done the work to get ready? Are we in the living room waiting for God to come out of his room when he's done getting ready for us to get in the car and go? Or have we left our position? Have we left our position? And when he gets in that car and he leaves, are we going to be in there with him or not? There's a harvest coming. And that harvest is going to be contingent on the seeds that you're planting. So what you're doing right now matters. The seeds you're planting right now matter. And I don't have to see it to believe it. I've sown it. I know it. I know it. Pastor came up earlier during worship and we were singing the song that God is up to something. I think we're going to go back to that song. Because here he said something and he was saying, how many of us, obviously we know God's already done something. Some of us are probably have reaped a good harvest in our life because we've sown good seeds, right? So we know that God's already done something, but God is still doing something. God is still doing something. And right here in this moment and pausing and realizing, all right, Lord, am I ready? Am I ready for what you're going to do? Am I in my position ready to receive the harvest that's coming? There's being ready, and then obviously there's the process of getting ready. And anything, right? When we're going to plant, I don't have a green thumb. I'm not like a gardener or a planter, so I can't really keep plants alive. But my mom is a green thumb. My roommates are green thumbs. Like, I've been around people enough that plant and harvest things to understand that I have to prepare my soil in order for me to actually get a harvest. My job is right? There's being ready and then there's getting ready. And we serve such a gracious God that he gives us those opportunities to get ready. He gives us those opportunities to kind of pause and get ready. Because obviously, what have we been saying this whole morning? The harvest is coming. There's something coming. God's doing something. And we want to make sure that we're ready. We want to make sure that we're in the living room ready and waiting for him when he comes out, right? We want to make sure that we're in that car when he leaves. And I really feel like God is wanting to just, for that specific person or people, that need to get ready right here. We're just going to take a moment. We're going to slow down. And we're going to just evaluate. Am I ready? Have I done the work? Have I showered? Have I gotten dressed? Did I brush my hair? Do I have my shoes on? Have I done the work? And am I ready? If we're going to plant something, you're talking earlier about, having to prepare the soil. We have to make sure that the soil's ready, right? So whatever is going to infect that harvest, we have to clean it out. We have to clean it. We have to make room because we're getting ready for what's next. Okay, God, I know that I've been planting seeds of self-indulgence. I know that I've been planting seeds of negligence, Lord. Lord, forgive me. I repent, and I want to ready my soil. I want to get ready, and I want to plant good seeds, because when you come out of your room, I want to be in that car with you when you leave. Are we ready for what's next? I'm going to ask everyone to bow your heads and close your eyes. And just focus in on yourself. And really just ask yourself and evaluate maybe where you're at right now. And asking if I'm ready for what's next. So the question no longer is there a harvest coming? The question no longer is, when is the harvest coming? The question no longer is, is God going to come through? Is God going to make a way? We already know that there's a harvest coming. We already know that. The question is, am I ready for the harvest? Based on the seeds I've been planting, am I ready for that harvest? And this morning, we want to prepare ourselves for it. We want to get ourselves ready for it. Evaluating the things in our soil, and maybe having to clean some things out, having to change some things, having to make room for the new seeds that we're going to start planting, whatever it is. Because God, we know that you're doing something. We know that you are in your room getting ready to go somewhere. And I want to be ready for you when you come out. Am I ready for what's next? And God, show us. Lord, show us. Right here in this moment, God, we are just taking a moment to pause and evaluate and get ourselves ready. God, we've exposed the lie of the enemy. We've exposed, God, that there is no reward for negligence. God, we know that in due season, a harvest is always going to come. We know that. And Lord, now, I just take a moment in your presence to just evaluate if I'm ready. And if I'm not, God, show me what I need to do to get ready. God, we know you're doing something. I'm going to have Jeremiah sing that song and really church, really just take a moment to just be in his presence and ready yourself for what he's asking you to be ready for. And really just take a moment and prepare yourself for the harvest that's coming.